Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Sexy Business Podcast. As always, I am Lewd Neko, coming to you live from a cuck chair, and joining me is Spooky Dangerous.
And I am tonight's bull, I guess.
And today, if it isn't already extremely obvious, we are going to be talking about the fetish or kink of NTR or cucking. Now, this is a pretty controversial kink, so I'll go ahead and say right away, if you have like major trauma around the concept of cheating, if you know that this is a kink that upsets you, turn off the video. This is the one time you're allowed to. Because one of the things we are going to talk about is the fact that there are a lot of strong feelings associated with this kink, and just remember that you are in charge of what you see on the internet. Now, that being said, I'm going to start off by just giving some quick definitions, so that way we're all on the same page on what we're actually talking about here. So NTR is an abbreviation for netorare, which is a Japanese term for essentially cheating as sort of a kink or a role play. The big difference between netorare and cucking, kind of like the English term, is that netorare is always non-consensual. So it is never agreed to, and it's usually a little bit more emotionally distressing. There can be like blackmailing where either I'm going to say man and woman here just to keep things simple because that's usually how it's framed, is where, either like the submissive male husband or whatever is being blackmailed into having his wife fuck some other guy, or where the woman is the one who is being blackmailed into doing something she actually doesn't want. It can sometimes be forced, it can sometimes involve manipulation, or it can just be like the wife running off and finding some sort of like better partner, and then the person either does or does not find out about this. And so, that one I would say is a lot more like emotionally masochistic. It's usually framed as being like very tragic and intense, whereas netorase is the equivalent of cucking. So in this case, the man would be actually willing. So they are consenting. Yep, I want you to go fuck my wife, and I'm looking forward to watching. And so that one is a lot more just not as much of that like heavy emotional element. And then there is Notori, which is essentially NTR, except for it is from the POV of the bull or the person who is stealing the wife away or the partner away. And so for this one, if you are someone who identifies more in like the dominant position, this would be the kind of genre that you might enjoy. Or in some cases, it also has an element of kind of like justice to it, where I've seen ones where the whole idea is that it's not necessarily about like stealing away and having this sort of like illicit relationship, but it's like your husband is literally the worst person alive, and I'm doing this to sort of like help you. Now, this is all very different from the actual literal concept of cheating. This is a role play, it is a fantasy, it is a consented to kink. But if someone cheated on you, that's not NTR, that's not cucking, that is just a consent violation. They hurt you very intimately. And so it's important to note that when people are talking about this, whether they're talking about a hentai or they're talking about like actually doing this in real life, like, negotiating to do cucking or something like that, is that again, it's consensual or it's purely a fantasy. It is not about actually making plans to cheat on your partner. And if someone is doing that, it's not a kink anymore. It's not a sexy little fantasy anymore. They are just a bad person.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of, any kind of kink play is all about consent and talking about it and stuff like that. I've encountered a lot of netorase type content. It's pretty easy to find if you're looking for more chastity kind of comics, like if you're in any kind of Eastern doujin site or whatever, and you're looking for chastity content. I think that I do when I'm kind of looking for inspiration, or a lot of times there's panels that are drawn really well that I use as reference pictures for my artists. You will find, rather than it being like a strictly femdom thing, it's much more of a netorase type content. The plot's normally the same. The woman is not super interested in sex. The woman is not super interested in sex because the man in the relationship is not very good at it, and then his inadequacies kind of build up over time, and then he wants to see her get fucked by somebody else, and then she's like usually super reserved, and then the bull comes along and he fucks her and she's like, wow, this is so different. His dick is so big. It's this whole thing is amazing. And then she kind of gets really, really into it or whatever. And then it kind of continues and exaggerates that kind of power dynamic, whatever. Often the man who is the kind of the main character, the husband type thing, is locked in chastity as like, the point is like humiliating him and how inadequate he is, and how small penis humiliation kind of stuff. And then like the bull is so good at sex and all this amazing stuff, and then like the main guy's forced to watch and is humiliated at the time. That's kind of a lot of what I see. And I did want to kind of circle back to talking about the crowd reaction to this, because a lot of stuff that I see just on Facebook, the normiest of normie sites, is there's a lot of pages that will post a panel or a page at the very beginning of a doujin before anything interesting happens, and oftentimes the women characters are just drawn so fucking ridiculous that it's enough to get people excited as to what's going to happen. But regardless of what the actual comics topic is, if you go into the comment section, there's 2 questions asked. The first question is, what are the numbers? The second question is this NTR? And then you will see a lot of comments afterwards, which is like, thank God this is not NTR, or fellas, don't go, it's a trap, this is NTR, or whatever. And that's like the entire comment section. So people do feel really, really strongly about this. I personally don't feel strongly about this. Allow me to share a personal anecdote, which I find to be very funny. I actually was cheated on. My first girlfriend cheated on me with my best friend's girlfriend. Which is just really funny to me, but like it kind of ruptured the entire friend group. No one was really speaking to each other after that. And she was kind of going through a phase of figuring out that she's a lesbian. So I'm like, look, I don't care. I get that. We kind of headed towards that eventuality anyway, but it was just done in a really cunty way. And so it's like, I don't have personal upset feelings about the NTR genre, but also a lot of the stuff that I encounter is in the Netsurase category, which is like not like consensual, but like really enthusiastically consensual. Like the man who's trying to be humiliated is like begging for this, and the wife is normally like, are you sure this is what you want? I don't even really want this. I'm just doing it because to make you happy or whatever. And then she goes from being reluctant to being super enthusiastic about it, and she's like, no, now I really do want this fucking big black dick or whatever. And so that's more the angle of the thing that interests me. And we talked about this in the last episode with the kind of No Nut November comics and stuff that people do, where you see the progress over time of like the corruption of the main character, or how they are forcibly feminized, or how they're pushed away from what their kind of role is. A lot of these kind of stories have that same vibe, where it's like the person being cucked is constantly minimized and diminished and humiliated, whereas they're kind of aggrandizing the bull as his sexual prowess is really handsome, or he has like a big 6-pack or something like that. He's really confident and cocky. And it's a lot more about the power dynamic specifically, rather than actually being like, oh my God, my wife is cheating on me. Oh no. Because again, they're fictional characters. It's really hard for you to communicate to me that these people are married and deeply care about each other, and that this is an insane violation of the thing, because they're just people drawn on a page, right? Like, and like the same kind of goes for incest. I've heard people be like, look, how are you going to reasonably convince me that these are brother and sister? I just think that this is a man and a woman. So it's like the same kind of thing. It's like so hard to be that convincing that this is such a gigantic betrayal to like really be upsetting. And so that's why I'm kind of confused as why so many people are like vehemently against it. But I wonder if it's just like these are more normie people that have just kind of discovered the porn coming out of Japan and seeing all this kind of doujin content, and just realizing just actually how much incest there is, just actually how much NTR content there is, because that's and how much lolly content there is. That's kind of the big 3, especially if you're using N-Hensai specifically. It's kind of the big 3 things that you'll see on there against your will.
Yeah, if I put on like my wokey hat for a second, is I always find it's interesting how like angry people get about NTR compared to something like rape, which is like an incredibly common kink, especially with women. Like there's all sorts of studies that talk about how like tons of women have rape fantasies, and usually the conclusion they come to is obviously like they're not actually imagining the real world equivalent happening. They aren't wishing for that. Again, it's about the associated feelings. It's about I can give up control. I don't have a choice in what's happening, so I don't have to feel bad about it. I like the ravishment. I like the passion behind it. They might have specific role plays or characters they associated with it. And, we kind of like just side eye that kink at this point, where even if it's based on this like really, common, unfortunately, like real world horrible thing, so many people have it that everyone's just like, yeah, it might not be not my thing, but they're not going to go into the comments of some comment that has non-con and be like, this is the worst thing in the world, like, KYS. Whereas with like NTR, we do get that really, really angry reaction. And straight up, I think it is just because it is about demasculinizing someone. Most of the time, like NTR is such a heavily gendered king. There are female cucks, and you can play around with the genders, but frankly, it's extremely uncommon. Female cucking is a little bit more common in real life, but in most NTR porn I've ever seen, it is usually like male cuck, male bull, and then the woman is the one who is getting kind of like stolen away in some
Yeah, I
way.
do want to double
And
down on that actually, because I think you hit a really good point where I think a lot of these people, and like our last episode we talked about in November, that same kind of alpha mindset, looking at it as oh, look, if I'm semen retention, I'm going to be so fucking powerful, my third eye will open, rather than, oh, I have to give up control to my key holder. I think it's the same kind of thing where it's like, wow, this character, this woman that they've drawn for the thing is really hot. I want to see her get fucked. But then they're now privy to the main character who they were, the first couple of panels make you insert into this character because of the main character or whatever. And then they're being demasculinized and they're not even the one that gets to fuck them. And they're like, I was the person that wanted to do that or whatever. Whereas I'm surprised that there isn't more cuck queen content that is written in the same way, where it's like, I need to find a woman that is going to really make my man come. I need to find a girl with really big titties or something like that, where like it's like that same kind of small penis humiliation thing, but more about feminine assets or whatever. And I'm surprised that that kind of thing doesn't exist so much, but maybe it doesn't exist and we don't see it because it's not as popular. A lot of porn is like desperately male focused, and I feel like a lot of women that are porn enjoyers just kind of end up going along for the ride because it's so difficult to kind of find stuff in that category that is, kind of written for a more wider audience.
yeah, and who knows, like maybe we will see like the tides turn eventually. Like NTR in cucking obviously has been around for, hundreds and hundreds of years, like literally. But it has always been this kink that is like very much associated with like masculinity. Like if you think back to like Shakespearean plays where men are like
Shakespeare
chronically concerned
mentions.
about yeah, right. Like he has plays where like people are just like chronically concerned about like their wives cheating on them because it's like the most humiliating thing because it's essentially about someone who at the time would have been extremely underneath you taking power from you. And that's really like why it's so tied up in the genders and stuff like that. And in the same way that we saw like chastity very much used to be, in my opinion, this like male centric kink. Like even like 10 years ago, there was almost nothing really about like chastity belts or female chastity. Even pet play, if we think back to like, kind of like a decade or two ago, again, it used to be this very heavily like gay male associated kink. And I think as time is going on and people are getting more into things, we're seeing a lot more fluidity and like who and what genders are getting involved in different roles. And so, in the same way that I think we're seeing more women get interested in female chastity, I think it's possible over time we're going to see more women get interested in NTR. As someone who does exist in kind of these like female, like geared porn spaces, I will say when it comes to like most like art and erotica, it's not super common as a theme. You might have like some books that deal with cheating, but it's usually in like more of like a, oh, I have to cheat because I'm stuck. Like it's more like she's the one in the position and she's like, oh, well, I don't really like this guy anymore. And there's this bad boy who's coming on to me now. And it's more about like drama and dilemma, because that's another appeal of NTR, is that it's really easy drama. So if you're making a visual novel or a fanfic or a comic, like it's immediately, it's high emotions. You can kind of establish character dynamics pretty quickly, especially if like you're doing like fan fiction. Like the Link Ganon Zelda thing is very, very common
Huge,
for
yeah.
either cucking or NTR, depending on how they take it. And it's just because like it's an easy character dynamic of, what if the villain actually got to steal the girl and you're already familiar with them, and you can throw in some feminization or whatever, and like bing bam boom, you've got a whole comic or whatever. Whereas we don't really have as much of that like same dynamic if you look at like, popular male characters, at least with women, is that like usually there's not someone who would steal them away. Like it's like, who would that even be? The only place where I've seen it is I've mentioned in a previous episode where you talked about like horny chatbots, is on the horny chatbot sites. I have seen NTR chatbots that are geared towards women, where it's usually either an arranged marriage, where like it's like a fantasy scenario, you were in an arranged marriage and now your husband just is cheating with you all the time with all of the whores, or it's like, your rich CEO husband who's bored with you and you're kind of just there for like show, things like that, where like usually there's some sort of like drama element. And then with the chatbot element, there's also the fact that like the NTR doesn't have to go the tragic route, because of the fact that some people are engaging with in a way that's like, either I'm going to humiliate him, so like I'm gonna take this guy down and peg him, or like I'm gonna leave him and run off with someone else. And so I've seen a lot more where it's about like engaging with this high drama scenario and then like taking it over, taking it into a new direction. Whereas I don't think as many women are engaging with it from the like position of like, I want to be emotionally humiliated. It just doesn't really seem to be something that a lot of women are interested in.
What about the more femdom angle? Because some of the NTR content is the woman is in a position where she believes, like, because like I said earlier and I outlined it, it's like the man is like really wanting the woman to do it and she's just kind of really reluctant. So what about a more femdom scenario where the woman thinks that the man is really inadequate and she really wants something else, and she's like already has all of the power in the relationship, and this is like kind of the next step along. So I very rarely see that. Normally it's like that same kind of No Nut November, like kind of timeline thing where it's like, oh, look, you're already locked in chastity and I have needs. And so it kind of, progresses like that. But I don't know. I think what you said is true. I think that over time we will see more and more artists, more and more people that are working on stuff, and something will happen. Like a fucking Pokemon NPC character will come out or something, and people will go, ah, woo! And then now there's a million Corbo gay art content on the internet or something. And I think Link, who is just, I don't know, a fucking sexual icon for some reason, it kind of sets up that same kind of thing where people are like, well, how can I put this twink in situations? And we do see a lot of like hyper dom Ganon villain steals the princess and feminizes Link, and a lot of that kind of stuff. Like Combos and Doodles, a guest we had on just recently, does a lot of stuff in this kind of niche, and we see a lot of this kind of content in general. And so I don't know, it's an interesting one because it's not something that the THM games cover, because it requires you to sell a relationship with an existing character, and both Shackles and Sleeve Shock and the Grand Bud Sex Hotel all single around a male sub main character who has been isolated. And that's kind of like the easy opening backdrop for like a dommy mommy to come in and, take advantage of the fact that you don't like have any of these safeguards, you don't have this, support network and stuff like that, and then be able to twist you to do their bidding, kind of a thing. So it would center around having to build this primary female character supposed to be attached to the main character and run everything through with that. And especially because so much of our content is Fuda, it makes it very different. I feel like Fuda NTR it would be like mean that the bull is a Fuda and you would still have a woman partner who's the one cheating or something like that. It again in itself is not really something that I see. So I don't know. I think, like you said, I think over time we will see more variations of it. I think we'll see people exploring with this kind of stuff, and if it resonates, people might become more popular, more common. Um, and then maybe we'll have cool games, cool comics and stuff in the future where we get to see more different gendered experiences, more kind of cuck queen content, more I don't know, maybe wholesome NTR or something. Um, or like different I like forced bi kind of stuff, or like different gendered kind of things, like the instead of it being a bull and it's like this guy with a six-pack and a 48-inch anaconda cock, and it's just a really hot girl that is the one that comes and dicks her down with the strap or something instead. And then it's like, well, how is your tiny dick locked in chastity ever going to compete with her massive strap-on dildo? Kind of thing. Like, I think there's so much space to play around, especially with male sub, because humiliating a male sub is really easy in context and situations and stuff like that. And I feel like we have a bright future ahead of us of all of the many options that we can find and do that with. But yeah, I don't know. Do you know people? Have you seen a lot of stuff that's more non-traditional NTR?
I have seen like a very small amount. I'll say I'm someone who I don't have an NTR kink. Like it's not something I'm actively getting off to or searching for. It just happens that a lot of extremely good artists do NTR, and I'm like, okay, I don't give a shit. Like I will follow you. And so I end up getting exposed to like a lot of NTR content, and I have seen some people playing around with it. Like I have seen some Fuda NTR. I think I've seen like a couple of images of like the lesbian NTR, like the whole idea of like I'm gonna steal your girlfriend away and make her gay, which I think is so fun. And that's the other thing is I think this has been kind of predominantly it's like a very like hetero associated kink, or like it's often
Yeah,
coming from
yeah,
like a
yeah.
very heterosexual like mindset of like you have your girlfriend and you need to own her and she needs to have all of her attention on you, and if she even so much as looks at another man, then like you are being emasculated, you need to do something about that. And I think, queer people are probably going to get more involved in it, and they're going to just like end up, getting creative with it. Even with like the Link, Ganon, Zelda stuff, I really enjoy the art that makes it like bisexual in some sense. So I've seen some stuff where it's not just about Link getting cucked, but then he also kind of becomes one of like Ganon's concubines in a way. And so it ends up being Link and Zelda servicing Ganon. And so it does have that sort of like bisexual element. And that is something that is hot for me, just as a, person who is attracted to whatever the fuck. Like I love that. I'm like, great. Like I think all these characters are hot and I like that they're all having sex in a fun way. So like that's the interest for me. In terms of like, like I've been like to plenty of like dungeon parties and things like that. I will say like you don't obviously see a lot of this like at dungeons, just because like a lot of dungeon parties are going to focus on kind of like the more showy kinks. Like everybody wants to do impact and rope and things like that. I think a lot of the cucking stuff typically actually happens at like swinger parties, which makes sense. Obviously, swinger parties are much more sex focused. That being said, I've definitely heard of a lot of people talking about cucking. I've heard of a lot of people getting more introduced to it. I've seen some classes offered on it. So it does seem to be a kink that, like, maybe it was more kind of associated with the swingers in the past, but it's kind of becoming more popular in the kink scene. And I think that could maybe encourage people to explore it a little bit more. I think the other thing is that, like, polyamory and non-monogamy is also very reviled by certain groups for similar reasons. There's like an entire subreddit of people just talking about how they think all polyamorous people are like horrible manipulative sluts. And some polyamorous people are horrible manipulative sluts. And again, it's the same thing where I think a lot of people are just projecting like they had a traumatic event where they got cheated on, they were forced into a polyamorous relationship they didn't agree to, things like that. And so instead of processing it as that person was bad and I should just associate them with being the bad person, they kind of take the thing out, and anything remotely associated with it now is evil. So now any depiction of non-monogamy it's bad, it's corrupting, it is what led to that person deciding to cheat on me. And so straight up, I just think a lot of people have like some unprocessed trauma. So hey, if you've been cheated on, or if you've had a similar like horrible experience, deal with it in therapy. But trust me, the random artist who is drawing like Link, in a chastity cage is not trying to hurt you.
Absolutely. We should put that on the thumbnail, on the advert. There is one other type that I do want to bring up that I feel like we haven't touched on yet. And I've seen a bunch of NTR kind of art, which is specifically about being able to impregnate the woman, where the man has failed many, many times, and then they require someone externally to come in and do it. Mare, who is one of the all-time kind of Fuda and femdom comic artists, has one which is like, it's a fertility clinic, and the unattractive husband comes in, and the wife, like they talk to the consultant, and then they come to the conclusion that most of the stuff they have won't work, but they have this one kind of radical therapy that might work out. And the wife's like, look, I'm happy to try anything. I really want to have a kid. And then they basically, like in a hospital room where they have the curtain that they pull across outside, and there's like the bed in there. And then she just gets absolutely railed by this handsome gentleman, but obviously the curtain doesn't hide any of the noises or anything, and the husband is sitting like literally right outside while the employee attendant or whatever is like explaining to him what's going on. And so stuff like that I feel like is another kind of similar angle of your job as a man is to put babies in women, and you have failed that, and therefore you are less of a man or whatever. And I've seen Fuda versions of that as well. There's like a lot of funny myth of Fuda stuff that I kind of like, where it's like, oh, their dicks are always bigger on average, or they have so much more cum volume dispelled, and stuff like that. And so being able to be like, okay, well, look, you as a man couldn't impregnate this woman, but me as a Fuda, boy howdy, is this my fucking special deal. And like a lot of stuff like that, which I think again is more of a adjacent breeder kink or whatever. But I think what is maybe a interesting takeaway for a person, if you're a non NTR enjoyer, not necessarily a hater, but like kind of ask where you're a bit agnostic to it. It is interesting to kind of realize that there is actually many, many different ways that these power dynamics can be used and interpreted, how these different characters can play around with each other and with other people, and whether that is a lot more closer to the core of what THM is doing, which is like the male sub humiliation and minimization and stuff like that. But then there's like more other angles, which is, I don't know, maybe more like a Nettori, like you said, more alpha focus. Like, yeah, I deserve all of the women regardless of their marital status or whatever. So it is versatile. It does give you a lot of opportunity to play around with lots of different characters and who you want them to be with. I feel like some of the most popular ones are, again, just like fucking Nintendo characters. For some reason, Nintendoans is like the horniest people out there. But we see a lot of Link and Zelda and Ganon. I also see a lot of Bowser and Peach, which is like, yeah. I know the fucking Nintendo company loves to say that Peach and Mario are just friends. But look, if Mario's in the friend zone because she's fucking slurping on giant turtle dick, then that still is an NTR category, my guy. So, but it does give porn artists a lot of tools to be able to play around with existing characters when they, kind of have a lineup of people. Because it might be that, oh, I don't find Mario sexy, or I don't think Link is a great top, but look, there's so many muscular characters in the Zelda franchise. We can have Ganon come and dick someone down. We can have any of the lovely Gerudo ladies come and dick someone down. And then you can just kind of pick however you want to fill out the, fill the roles of the cast, put the people on the stage, as Shakespeare would say, and then try and figure out what kind of interesting and add drama, what kind of relationship dynamics we're going to be playing around with. For me, obviously, it's not going to be directly personal and directly affecting me. It's all play. All porn is inherently the stage. It is the show.
They aren't real. I promise.
That's happening. So it's like, even if you're watching a fucking JAV, but like not even talking about a comic, we're talking about like real people filmed on camera, and it's like, again, a really popular thing. They're just actors. They're actually really excited to be having sex with this person, even if they are not acting like it, because the whole point is that in porn you have a lot of control over who you work with. So they're there intentionally, and also they're receiving money for being there intentionally. And it's not harmful. It's incredibly planned and safe. And very well talked through and consented to, as opposed to what the kink is trying to communicate about it, which might be more forceful, might be non-consensual, because that is the fantasy. And I know we kind of touched on this a little bit in the last episode, but porn is a healthy thing. It's not inherently bad, but you can use anything poorly. You can, use it as an unhealthy coping mechanism. You can escape into fantasy too much sometimes. And it does help to hear people like us talking about it in a more reasoned fashion, in a more like, let's kind of explain it, let's talk about, what kind of aspects make this up, and kind of normalize it a little bit instead of it being this great, crazy, big, scary myth of a thing. So I am curious to hear if you are just a fucking huge NTR hater. And if you could just kind of explain why, because I don't know, there's no comic on the internet that's going to make me that mad that I need to go and write comments on a Facebook post. No one should be writing anything on any Facebook aspect. So it's a bit harder to believe for me.
And, like, it's fine to have this be, like, your number one hated kink. Like, I have kinks that, like, I think are gross, or, like, I don't like them. I have kinks that are, like, upsetting for me. And, what I do is I block those tags. I don't look at it. If I see it in a thing I like, I go, well, that's not for me. And then I go somewhere else. Please remember that, like, all of the people who are making this kind of content are actual real people who read your comments. I think we can forget that sometimes, that, like, porn does not just, like, suddenly manifest out of nowhere. Someone worked on that. They took a lot of time to draw that. It was sexy to them. It meant something to them. And so, even if this is your, like, most hated kink, just be a grown-up, do the responsible thing, block the artist, and you will never have to see it again. It's literally that easy, rather than going into their comments or into their DMs and, sending them horrendous shit. Because, like, I've seen some, like, legitimately just, like, awful things that have been said to NTR artists who are just making, fictional art. They are not trying to hurt you specifically. And, if you think about it, you're probably being a bit of a hypocrite, because I'm going to assume anybody watching this, you've got some weird fucked up fantasy. I know you do in the back of your head. Whether it's like, oh, you're into non-con, or you're into anthro furries, or you're into
Pregnant
spanking,
Sonic the
or
Hedgehog.
bondage, or whatever the else. You're probably into something that, if it was literal and actual and real, would be unethical or illegal or horrible and would make you a bad person. And so if you can understand that you can be into those things, and that it doesn't mean you actually want that in real life, that you want to cause harm to others, then you can also understand that people who are into this are not actually wishing harm upon real people. They're not hoping that this happens to them. They're not hoping that, like, people, actually get, like, non-consensually cheated on. They are just indulging in a fantasy that has all sorts of other kinks in it that are enjoyable to them. So literally just, like, chill out, take a deep breath, block the tags you don't like, and go on with your day instead of harassing these, like, random artists who are just trying to make a living.
Yeah, I do want to double down on that, because those artists are small people. When you type comments on their posts, they will see it. If you type comments in the YouTube comments here on this video, I'm here, this person talking to you right now, yes, you, I will read it, and I will know what you have said. And so if you write mean things, that will upset me. Right? And it's the same for an artist. And the artist is like, well, I spent millions of years and hours and sweat and tears and crying working on this thing. They will be able to read it. Normally, what happens is when people are writing, like, a negative review on a Steam game, or, like, writing an angry comment on the internet, the person that they're writing about is so far removed from where they are that they will not see it. And people get really comfortable with this kind of thing. Like, if you're writing a mean comment on the largest AAA game of all time, and there's like 40,000 other people doing it, your negative comment is just not even going to be seen. It's just in a sea of nothing. If I say mean things about Jeff Bezos on this podcast, he's never going to hear them because he's not here to watch it. I'm not engaging with him directly. When you're engaging with artists, there's no artist that is so big and so far removed from their ability to communicate to you. So if their art is posted somewhere and you reply to it, they will see it. And if you've learned anything from any of the art interviews that we've had on here, they're not the most confident and, strong and resistant to negative feedback as some of us can be. So just be nice sometimes, most of the time, all of the time if you can help it. And while you're being nice, why don't you, Neko, tell everyone which buttons that they could click that make us happy?
Well, you don't want to be a cuck, or maybe you do. But you know what would make you like a super cool alpha Chad? Watching more of our videos, you can learn about all of the other non-NTR games and topics that we've talked about. So if you absolutely hated this video, you're number one NTR hater on the internet, guess what? We've got other videos where we talk about all sorts of different things that'll probably make you feel better. So go watch some of those. And then while you're at it, go ahead and click that subscribe button and turn on notifications because our videos get cucked by YouTube because we say all the naughty sex words. And so if you don't turn on notifications, you're probably not going to see any of our weekly updates. And we do post weekly, and we've got lots of cool stuff that are going to be coming up. And then while you're at it, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Are you the number one NTR hater? Are you someone who enjoys it? Or maybe you prefer cucking? Maybe you have some opinions about it. Let us know in the comments, or like maybe you have a particular game or piece of media related to cucking that has been really interesting to you. And speaking of, we do also take suggestions. So if you absolutely hated or loved this topic, and you have a different topic that you'd like us to cover, whether it's a game, a fetish, or even someone who we might interview, feel free to leave those suggestions down below because, as Spooky just mentioned, we do read those comments and we have gotten inspired based off of them before, so we do appreciate any feedback. But that'll be it for this episode of the Sexy Business Podcast, and we will see you next time. Bye,
Bye
everybody.
bye.